The joys of off-road driving and mastering a four-wheel drive vehicle are being discovered by more and more people, too. So this review of 10 years of the Camel Trophy will be combined with 10 off-road driving lessons, a Range Rover Vogue Automatic, a Land Rover 110 Turbo Diesel, and a Camel Trophy veteran that survived the 1988 Sulawesi adventure are our partners. First, some basic rules for off-road driving. Engage the low-range gear and lock the central differential before you drive in difficult terrain. Always use the pedals extremely sensitively, avoiding abrupt movements. Brake only when absolutely necessary. Use the clutch only when stopping or changing gear, not forgetting to take your foot completely away from the clutch pedal again, so that you don't depress it inadvertently when the going gets rough, and then lose control of the vehicle. Hold the steering wheel in both hands, but don't put your thumbs inside, or driving over a pothole could be very painful. Above all, take to heart the most important rule of off-road driving. Drive as slowly as possible, as fast as necessary. The Camel Trophy is awarded to the best driver, not the fastest. In the extremely difficult conditions which are a part of this event, the speed rule has proved itself over and over again. As slowly as possible, as fast as necessary. If you should ever find yourself in the position of having to drive through a wood or heavy undergrowth where there is no road, it's always worth taking the trouble to check out the terrain beforehand, to find the route which will do least damage to vehicle and nature. Stop and explore on foot. Determine your exact route. Pay a special attention to the nature of the ground beneath the undergrowth, so when driving through you avoid deep holes, bogs, and other obstacles. Select the gear which is most appropriate for the type of ground and its inclination, and drive as slowly and as smoothly as possible into the critical area. Follow your chosen route as closely as you can, taking care to steer clear of tree roots and large stones. If you're forced to drive over small trees or bushes, do so at the same very low speed. This minimizes damage to both vehicle and nature. Especially important, if you have to drive over an obstacle and you're driving a Land or a Range Rover, try to keep the obstacle on the left side of the vehicle because there is slightly more ground clearance than on the right, where the differential is located. If you have followed all these instructions carefully, you will have done everything possible to limit the damage which can occur in such situations. A muddy surface requires a slightly higher speed than a dry one. Wherever possible, stay in the tracks of previous vehicles. Try to avoid steering into any slight slides in order to correct them, because the vehicle will normally stay on course, despite a certain amount of side slippage. If the steering lock is high, you must reckon with the fact that the vehicle is liable to slide on for a while in the tracks before suddenly moving sideways. You lose momentum getting back on course. The drive becomes uneven and irregular, and the danger of getting bogged down increases. Furthermore, driving this way puts excessive strain on the suspension. On the other hand, if you steer lightly through the mud at constant speed, you will discover that the only effect on the vehicle is a mud bath, easily removable by a good wash. In extreme cases, you can also reduce tire pressure. This will improve the flex characteristics of the tires and hence their self-cleaning ability. Traction will be improved and the tendency to sink into the mud reduced. The general rule is that humps should be driven over at right angles and ditches crossed diagonally. This ensures the best possible coordination between axles, springs, and transmission. Here again, the rule is do everything as slowly as possible. Channels and gullies should be negotiated in such a way as to keep the vehicle level. The individual stages. Approach the hump vertically so that the wheels stay on the ground. Then turn to the right and cross the ditch diagonally. 3 wheels provide sufficient traction here. Another right-angled approach to the next hump. And then on the level again, drive slowly along a gully. There's room for a complete camera team underneath. The whole thing again together. Hump at right angles. Ditch diagonally. The second hump. And the gully. A series of humps can be crossed at right angles as long as there's no danger of the chassis making contact with the ground. And that can happen a lot quicker than one might think. Note how, with the camera in exactly the same position, this part can be negotiated at an angle without any problem. However, trying to apply the same theory on a quite different surface, such as sand, will prove to be useless. A sand dune like this, for example, cannot be conquered by driving at right angles or diagonally, and certainly not by driving slowly. In no time at all, the wheels have burrowed their way into the soft sand, and the maneuver has to be broken off. So far, we've been using the first part of the speed rule, drive as slowly as possible. But now it's time to apply the second part, drive as fast as necessary. Then it can be done. Under normal circumstances, you will not come near this point of no return. A natural internal sense of balance will prevent you from coming too close to the turnover point, let alone from going beyond it. However, you must pay very careful attention to the road surface and avoid any parts where the vehicle could slide. Where lateral clearance is tight, it's not enough to stop the vehicle from slipping sideways. If the direction of inclination changes from one side to the other, the highest point on the vehicle can swing over a very long way. You must learn to anticipate such a situation in good time and allow for it. If the surface is slippery as well, whether frozen or soft, muddy or sandy, both factors, the risk of slipping and the increased list, have to be allowed for. A wide gap in which you could normally park without any trouble suddenly becomes very narrow indeed. At the top, there's plenty of room, but at the bottom, there's not enough space to maneuver. Incautious use of the brake is all it takes to ensure that you fail. Don't be too proud to admit such a mistake early enough to start again from the beginning, before you get stuck. A slope is especially tricky to deal with when the ground is sand. The very uneven loading of the wheels takes effect much more quickly. The vehicle begins to slip downwards, and steering corrections are all but impossible. And then you may not be able to save the situation by reversing. Not a very pleasant place to park. Always think twice before attempting to cross an area which is likely to involve extreme vehicle inclination. It's preferable to abort a maneuver rather than get stuck. Otherwise, you'll need the advice in our next chapter on winching earlier than you might have wished.